So the last step is actually writing a critique. So I want to take a couple of minutes and just kind of go over our format, because we're going to be using this format kind of over and over again in really short critiques and longer critiques, and we're always going to follow this kind of three-step format. So the format we're going to use, it's going to be describe the photograph. So that'll be the first thing we do, is describe. Then we will reflect or interpret. You can kind of use those words interchangeably. And then the final thing is formal elements. So what you're going to be doing is look at that picture below, which is a picture of Abraham Lincoln. You might want to watch the video at the bottom, which kind of explains a little bit about kind of this battlefield and what was happening and kind of this turning point in the war. And this photographer, Alexander Gardner, had this opportunity to go and photograph Abraham Lincoln on the battlefield right after this kind of pivotal moment. It's a couple of days before the Emancipation Proclamation was announced. Before he did the Gettysburg Address. So it's a couple weeks before that that kind of call to action. And so he has this photograph. And so when we talk about description, what we want to look at when we talk about description is really about the facts. It's what do I see? What do I know for certain? There's no speculation. So in that, we don't want to say things like he looks angry, because maybe it's something else, right? Don't forget, these are wet plate processes on battlefields in the 1850s, and he's taking pictures. He may just be standing still and having to stay still and doesn't want to be blurry, and it may not be that he's angry, right? So we want to stick to facts, things that we see and we know for certain, and that holds true whenever we're describing it. If we know for certain also that it's a type of a medium, we can say that it's a wet plate photograph, or we can say that it's black and white, or we can say things like that, because we know those for certain. And then the next section, which will be the interpret part or the reflect part, well, in those parts we can start to think about, like, well, maybe he looks really solemn, or maybe he looks, this way or that way. If we know something about that background, maybe we can relate to, that moment in time, and we can reflect on that. Or it might be about how it makes us feel, or maybe we have some association with Abraham Lincoln, some project that we did when we were in second grade about presidents, and that's all tied up in it too. That's a reflection, that's a interpretation of the photograph. Then in the last part, we're going to write about formal elements. So you're going to start to talk about those. It could be composition, right? So you might discuss certain compositional techniques that we've learned. It could be design principles. So it might be, how there's emphasis that's created, or there might be about, some of the art elements, and you might be talking about lines and those sort of things. It could be camera technique. It could be, things about depth of field or shutter speeds, or whatever is happening within that photograph. So those formal elements are those kind of technical things that we kind of recognize and identify that are inside those photographs. So take a couple minutes. I want you to write a couple of sentences about each of those elements. So start with describe, and then write a couple of sentences about what you see in this photograph, and do the same thing with the interpret and the reflect part. When we tomorrow start the inspiration blog, we're going to be looking at a much abbreviated version of that, and so we'll look at that tomorrow. All right, thank you.